Funding for this program was provided by Gensler and Associates Architects, providing comprehensive architectural and interior design services nationwide, and by the Andrew W. Mellon Foundation and the National Endowment for the Arts.
My theme has never really varied. I've wanted people to become familiar with the contemporary American landscape and recognize its extraordinary complexity and beauty. Over and over again, I've said that the commonplace aspects of the contemporary landscape, the streets and houses and fields and places of work, could teach us a great deal, not only about American history and American society, but about ourselves and how we relate to the world. It is a matter of learning how to see.
John Brinkerhoff Jackson, writer, geographer, historian, teacher, lives in the town of La Cienega, not far from Santa Fe, New Mexico. Jackson has spent his life paying close attention to the world we have built around us in unique and original fashion. Through his books, essays, and lectures, Jackson has inspired generations of architects, photographers, writers, and planners to look with more clarity at the everyday landscape.
Well, he's a maverick scholar who started a magazine to found a school of thought because he thought Americans needed to know about the ordinary environment. Jackson's not a crusader, he's more of a, what is he? Pioneer? No, it's too trite. Jackson's he's a writer. He's a writer who decides to talk about the meaning of the American environment.
John Jackson has vision like a great artist. He has vision of not only our time and our place, but he knows how to synthesize what he sees now with history. He knows how to kind of unveil elements about our culture and other cultures and times and places to let us know about ourselves, our human existence, our place, what we do good and bad in the landscape, but who we are.
It's charming when there's a whole bunch of it. Usually got little red streaks in it. It's called yerba de manso. Good for everything. Toothache, tuberculosis, hangover, cancer, unhappy love, everything.
Jackson refers to himself as a cultural geographer, but it is misleading to think of him as belonging to any particular discipline. He is of that rare class, an innovator, an intellectual on his own terms, a gentleman scholar who invented his own field of study. His talent is tempered by an old-world graciousness and modesty. The resume that he occasionally offers is simple. It mentions only his Harvard education, class of '32, his wartime duty in military intelligence in the '40s, the founding of Landscape magazine in 1951, and the books which form the body of his work. Jackson was an immensely popular lecturer at Berkeley and Harvard during the '60s and '70s. His unorthodox and original approach attracted huge crowds of reverent students and admirers. Today, Jackson has turned away from academic celebrity. At 78, he's headed in new directions that he warns may not have the same popular appeal as his earlier work.
The things that interest me in the landscape are not the amusement aspects of it, nor even the outrageous things, but the glimpse of a future that I see developing in America. I am interested in seeing how certain spaces are being shared, or not being shared, or whatever is happening in the country. So this leads me into an abstract and probably ugly field. I'm not saying it's beautiful. So you'll have to forgive me if I seem to have shifted from this pleasantly popular, amusing approach to the landscape to one which is, I don't know how to describe it, but which is, to me, has a prophetic value.
To see through Jackson's eyes is to see a landscape full of history and the human presence, To accompany him, as a documentary crew did for 3 weeks in the spring of 1988 on a journey across the American Southwest, is to witness an American philosopher at work. It is also a lesson in learning how to see.
I am not a scholar. I am not a speculator much, but I see things very clearly, and I rely on what I see. And that may not be what one should rely on, but it's what I rely on. And I see things that other people don't see, and I call their attention to it, and they like it.
Jackson brought us to the ruins of Chaco Canyon. Located in the remote high desert 100 miles west of Santa Fe, Chaco is an ancient American city, abandoned and left undisturbed for centuries. For Jackson, who looks at contemporary culture the way that an archaeologist looks at ruins, visiting Chaco Canyon is a chance to speculate on a landscape of the past.
Now, look at the size of the Vigo over that window. The window could have been much wider, but it isn't. It's narrower. So that they did have some idea of what they were doing, you see.
The pueblos at Chaco Canyon were built by the Anasazi, Navajo for ancient ones. Their architecture, 1,500 years old, is a testament to the beauty and durability of stone. The mystery of what kind of society lived here, or why it was abandoned 700 years ago, has attracted archaeologists to Chaco ever since it was discovered in the mid-19th century. It attracts Jackson as well.
There's an obvious fascination for something that's old and magnificent and mysterious. I think if we knew more about it, perhaps it would lose some of its magic, but it certainly is not going to lose that in a hurry. If you want to confront an architectural mystery or American problem, come here. Don't go over and measure the Tivoli villas. It's the kind of thing that architects ought to be thinking about. And then don't do it. And here it is, one of our great national monuments, and those architectural students don't come here. They really ought to be plunked down and said, what in the hell is this all about, you know? And they would say, I don't know. There are mysteries in architecture that we don't understand, and we've got to find out.
From the air, another mystery. A web of recently discovered roads that trace over the desert surrounding the canyon. For Jackson, these primitive roads are a clue. They played the same crucial role to the lives of the Anasazi as our highways and streets do for us today.
What amazes me about the Chaco Canyon roads is I remember what we were told, that there's nothing along them. But once in a while there was a marker of some sort, didn't you say? A little shrine or something, but no sign that people were using it in their daily lives. So it's like an interstate, a very, very much an establishment, and I think it is. Anything that's as straight as that and as uniform as that is establishment product. So we're looking at an establishment skeleton, and the vernacular flesh has fallen away. We don't know what flesh there was there, do we?
700 years separate that culture from our own. Yet Jackson sees essential qualities in this canyon. Those qualities are at the heart of the way he looks at landscapes.
What I've been figuring out is that there are these two ways of organizing the world. Now, this is not unique to me, I assure you. Nevertheless, this is what I think. And I call these two terms, and they're unfortunate, but that's what I can't find anything else. One of them I call the establishment, the other I call vernacular.
Establishment means order, architecture, the world of law and property. It sets forth the rules by which we live our lives.
The establishment has permanence, which has some a philosophy or method back of what is done. It is carefully thought out. It is thought in terms of the future. Now, these are abstractions, but let me give you an instance of how the establishment organizes space. It divides the United States into states. It puts the grid system on it. It divides the city into city lots. because there is order there, a permanent order, presumably, and it's an order which has a certain aesthetic quality, actually. We want it permanent, we want it to serve the future, we want it to be used by others, but we know how it should be, and we are going to put it down. When I say we, I don't mean just a group of people that getting together saying we're going to impose on the working class. I mean people of education, people of thought, people of conscience, people of taste. And the establishment is composed of these people who feel that the world has to be ordered, as indeed it does. There has to be plans for the future, and there has to be a certain element of beauty.
Vernacular is the other world. It is the world built by necessity, with local ideas by local people. It is temporary and not part of the world of fashion or architecture. It is the vernacular landscape that Jackson seeks to decipher. In his eyes, the relationship between vernacular and establishment is a thread that can be traced throughout history.
The instance which I find most revealing is the medieval, where you had the notion of territory, which is owned or governed by a class, and who control that. And then you had the people who live on this land and who use it, but who don't own it, the peasantry. And so you have there a vernacular, which is the farmer, the peasant, the hunter, the fisherman, whatever it may be, who uses space without owning it. Now, the person who owns it has quite a different point of view toward it. He wants to preserve it, he wants to protect it, he wants to maintain it, to pass it on to his children primarily, but also for his own power. So that you have these 2 points of view, the aristocrat who says, it's mine, and we have a relationship between tenant and landlord, the other one who says it is ours because God gave it to us. And this does eventually make a great difference in how people approach the world that they live in.
It is the geography of everyday people and everyday places that has intrigued Jackson for the past 40 years. And New Mexico is a laboratory for the vernacular. Jackson came here in 1933, right after his graduation from Harvard, to become a rancher and a cowboy. He never left. After Chaco Canyon, Jackson led us east on Highway 25 toward the towns of San Jose and Villanueva, small Hispanic villages along the Pecos River Valley. These are places he knows well.
The little houses along the edge are very pretty, or have been, with their porches, and you can imagine that it had a formality at one time because they're all pretty uniform. But I'm afraid there's not much to boast about now.
San Jose, New Mexico, population 160.
But this is typical of the villages I was writing about and of what's happened to rural New Mexico.
In his 50 years in northern New Mexico, he's observed the slow decline of the rural landscape.
The moral of the story is in almost every case the same. Existence for people in the country became more and more difficult, more and more joyless and without reward. Low pay, monotonous work, a sense of being isolated and forgotten, a sense of diminishing hope for the future, afflicted one village, one farmstead after another. This is a specimen, and a very dilapidated specimen, of typical New Mexico 19th century architecture. Insofar as it's got an Anglo influence, the milled work here is what the Anglos introduced when they introduced sawmills around in the 1830s or so. But what gives it a vernacular quality, or at least a very homemade quality, is the use of so many different materials. We got boards here, we got tin here, we got adobe here, we got brick down there, several layers of adobe. It's a house that's always in the process, either of decay or being reconstructed.
At its height, San Jose was a healthy rural community on the road east from Santa Fe. Today, it's almost a ghost town. Jackson spoke with Sherman McKenna, a resident with dreams of reviving a long-abandoned grocery store in the plaza.
Yeah, that's where they put
Are
that
these
now.
houses abandoned?
No, a friend of ours, she's 80 years old, Tapia, Costalita. She has cancer and you know, it's kind of
Yeah.
ailing. But this house is empty. This one, there's two little old ladies that lived in this one. But they, you know, they've been kind of moving things in and out, and so you. And this one is empty. But people are starting to come back up
I'm
here.
glad to hear that.
Like I said, this started back in 1792, and there's a back wall out there. I can show you into the corral, where it was there then, and they had goats,
What?
and they got little holes in the walls with bars in them where they used to shoot at the Indians to keep them from stealing the goats. So, I mean, it's got a whole bunch of history with it.
471 2546.
2546. And what was your name?
John Jackson.
Yeah, and we'll call you as soon as we open up.
Well,
We're gonna-
before you open, so that they can come here and be for the opening, see?
Okay, yeah.
If you know a week in advance, I'll call the station and tell them it's hard to get in touch with you. What's your last name, ma'am?
McKenna.
McKenna. I'll just tell them that Mr. and Mrs. McKenna are opening an old-fashioned store in San Jose on such and such a day, and I think they ought to cover it. Come up here and look at it. Well, you're going to have a big success, I know that.
Yeah,
And you get tourists to come here, serve them hot coffee so that people can know there's a place. You can stop between Las Vegas and Santa Fe and get a cup of coffee.
Oh,
There's
yeah.
no place. I find that I have a very strong vernacular sense, which has many limitations. And I know that that is the backbone of America. Not that we want nothing but vernacular values everywhere, but we go come back to them. The vernacular house says we depend on our neighbors and our friends and in being part of the world. And this produces a different type of environment, different type of home life. So the vernacular is not poverty necessarily. It is a different relation to the world outside. And this is what I like. This is what I find very valuable. And of course, it's eternal.
June 1944, the Allied Army invades France. The 9th Infantry moves into the French countryside, and along with them is Captain John Jackson, a member of military intelligence. Wartime journalist Ernie Pyle wrote about him in his book, Brave Men. Captain John Jackson was an unusual fellow with an unusual job. The guy who went in and brought out German generals who thought maybe they would like to surrender. He was a bachelor, 35 years old. It was quite a coincidence that he was born in the town of Dinard, about 30 miles from Cherbourg. But he was straight American for generations back. For someone raised in the rarefied world of the American upper class, serving in the Army was as liberating for Jackson as it was for the French.
I was very happy to join the Army. I was happy in the Army. This is something you better not say in polite society. But I loved the Army. I was in there for 6 years. And I was about to join up again. Then I had thank God I didn't do it. But I was all for it. I loved the Army.
Jackson was assigned the job of investigating the terrain that lay ahead of the advancing army.
We would be located in the castle or the manor house of an important landowner, and he would have book after book after book about farming and the history of the community and different plants and road layouts. It was a very rich library that any French landowner had, and I read them with great interest. Man in the soil, man in the forest, man in the wind, the coast and the sea, topics like that that were visible to the average reader. Very well done by scholars.
Jackson saw the classic landscape of Europe that he knew as a child utterly destroyed. But the French approach to human geography that he discovered made a powerful impression. After the war, he would take that back with him to his ranch in New Mexico.
And then when I came over here, after the war, I was still thinking about it,
and I went into ranching here in New Mexico. And I suppose I sort of gave it up. And then I had this horseback accident, and that stopped me from activity for a long time. And I took up the idea again. And I, of course, shouldn't have done it because I didn't know enough about the topic. I didn't have enough money, and I didn't have any experience. But nevertheless, I did.
Jackson the rancher became Jackson the writer. His magazine, Landscape, would bring to American readers not only those European ideas, but also his own passion about the importance of the American environment.
Some magazines are started by a group of people who get together, by a group of people who decide we need a journal because we've got this school of thought. Jackson did the reverse. He made a school of thought out of a group of people with the journal and his own traveling. Because he could travel most of the year, he wasn't tied to a 9 months of the year academic job. He became the ambassador, the go-between, the I don't know if there's a word for it, the broker for this whole field of study.
The magazine started a revolution in thinking among a new generation of architects, geographers, and designers. Contributors included the brightest lights in American design. One of them was landscape architect Lawrence Halprin.
Those of us who were architects or designers, we came back with a desire to change the world through design. But we had been working with it only on a physical level. And here all of a sudden was a statement about the fact that the physical world had more to it than what we could design into it. That in a sense, the world as it is had merit. And that we ought to look about it not with a theory so much as look at it and understand what it was about.
Landscape starts in 1951 as a magazine about the Southwest, which Jackson calls the Journal of Human Geography or some title such as that, with a concern for aerial photography. Well, by the time 18 years has passed, it's a magazine that's far richer than that, far broader than that, so that the intervening years are essentially a documentation of the growth of Jackson's mind.
We'd seen a few issues of his magazine, Landscape. He'd sent them out, I'm sure. He called it its Magazine of Human Geography. But no one knew who he was. It came from Santa Fe, and it was a name that didn't register with anyone. And the inquiries went around. I remember getting a postcard from one of the leading geographers in the East, very cryptically, who the hell is J.B. Jackson? I must say, I think is one of the virtues of Landscape magazine, and still remains unusual virtue, that foreign ideas were introduced. It was merely a matter of translating. I didn't have to do any interpreting or criticism, but I did know French and German, and I could struggle along in Italian and Spanish. And that, just a few little articles from those things would open up a European scene. So finally, it was just getting too expensive. It never made any money, never made a cent. And I never got any money for it, I may say. I mean, there was never a foundation help or anything. It was all mine.
Poverty, and what Jackson calls the hard lessons of the passage of time, have made their mark on New Mexico. The rural landscape is in decay, but there are places that have somehow been spared. Villanueva is a 200-year-old village. It's only 10 miles down the road from San Jose, but a world apart in the life of the people who live there. Jackson advises that we pay attention not to what things look like, but how they are used.
Villanueva represents what these villages might have continued to be if circumstances hadn't become so bad. In other words, a relatively prosperous, efficient farming, new houses, a certain amount of increase in population. It's just the way towns in the East or villages in the East have grown. And that's the reason I think this is a beautiful place. It's a very nice kind of community of the New Mexico variety.
There are clues to the social life of a village within every landscape. In Villanueva, a well-maintained community well, an irrigation system in good working order, and a church that its citizens are proud of. Villanueva is a place where an old order still exists, a remnant of a rural life full of self-sufficiency and self-respect.
Well, basically, Villanueva it's always been a town that's kept pretty much the people that live here pretty much to themselves, very close. Most of the people here, or I would say 99% of the people, are Catholic, and that's probably one of the main reasons that that people stick together. If any transfers has been done on the land, it's within the same families, the same people. People basically don't want to sell to outsiders. So that's pretty much what's kept the town together.
The beauty that I see is nothing particularly esoteric. It's prosperity, self-respect, comfort. And these houses around here, they've got their cement walls, they've got their tin roofs, they've got their trailers and everything, but they're living comfortably, and I think that's terribly important. The older I grow and the longer I look at landscapes and seek to understand them, the more convinced I am that their beauty is not simply an aspect, but their very essence, and that that beauty derives from the human presence. The beauty that we see in the vernacular landscape is the image of our common humanity. Hard work, stubborn hope, and mutual forbearance striving to be loved.
Heading north, the landscape changes dramatically. The singular beauty of the New Mexican high desert gives way to the agricultural valleys of southern Colorado. On the outskirts of Alamosa, Jackson takes us to a lot full of agricultural machinery, an essential element of farm life and the farm landscape.
We're standing in a used equipment lot in southern Colorado, where the farming is on a commercial scale, not a very highly mechanized scale, and where this represents an enormous investment that every farmer involves himself in. And I dare say every one of them represents 4 or 5 jobs which have been eliminated, plus going bankrupt buying them.
What are you looking for?
I was just looking to see what the generic name of these things was. It's what the generic name, they call it, that's a trade name, is stackliner. They must have some other name for it, but that doesn't matter, I guess. A New Mexico farmer can get along with his equipment without going to town. Here, they get the servicing, they buy them, they finance them, they learn about them here. So that this is, in a sense, a space that's essential to the modern community.
With a population of 7,000, Alamosa, Colorado is familiar to anyone who travels through the small towns of America. Main Street lined by solid brick buildings, comfortable frame houses, each with a lawn, a trailer park on the wrong side of town. Its similarity to dozens, perhaps hundreds of other such towns implies unimportance to many, but it is a landscape that Jackson relishes. Any change, any transformation is easier to detect against the classic American backdrop of Main Street, USA.
50 years ago, when there were not so many cars, there were some cars, this may have had grocery stores, hardware stores, food stores, restaurants and everything up and down it, and it'd be a 2-story building, and then upstairs would be the lawyer's office, the dentist's office, and so forth. And now that has gone for a variety of reasons. So I think what we're seeing here is a transitional type of Main Street.
The transition is obvious. America has become an intensely mobile society. We've accepted the domination of cars and trucks on our main streets. Adapting to this change, particularly for small cities like Alamosa, is vital to their future.
And the mobile consumer is, I won't say he's demanding, but he gets more and more places designed for him. As I say, the gas station is one. The dry cleaners is another. The liquor store is another. The food store is another. And so a lot of architecture, of retail architecture, is oriented toward the mobile consumer.
For a town its size, Alamosa has more than its share of traffic. The pressure it puts on the pedestrian finally becomes too much.
When we depended on trains, you had to go to the depot to get the thing. Sorry. Now that's very hard. That's very hard for people to take, don't you think?
Very hard what?
Very hard for people to take this kind of thing. I think it's awful. But I haven't heard any of the others do that. They ought to arrest him.
The automobile will not be denied, and Main Street must come to terms with commercial traffic.
But what ultimately the next step will be that some of these will be torn down for parking spots or for drive-in service or for a building which is further back so they can park in front. This won't be a satisfactory arrangement if the town grows at all. That's the trouble with the downtowns. They simply don't know how to accommodate the automobile. But they'll face it in time. They'll either have parking lots here or they'll make this a pedestrian mall or something. Something is going to happen to keep this town alive.
What happens on the street in Alamosa and anywhere Jackson visits is of vital importance to him. Who uses the street? How is it used? How is it changing? These are the questions he asks, and most of all, this question: what does it mean?
In the Middle Ages, the street was the place where the house spilled over, and the chaos and confusion and congestion, everything else of the medieval street is something that one reads about in amazement. But it was a place where you went and ate outside your place. You worked outside because the light was better. You chopped wood outside. You hung your laundry outside. You saw your neighbors. The street was very much more important than the house itself. But what happened was with the street that the establishment, and I use that word not in an invidious sense, but they said, listen, we are not going to have dancing bears and people sleeping here and people butchering cows on the street. This is for traffic, for Christ's sake. Can't you see that? These cars have got to go through, or these wagons have got to go through. So the street becomes a specialized area. So the first step is to clear it up and to pave it. And that doesn't destroy the life in it, but it certainly introduces an element of order to it. And then they begin to think about the traffic. And they say, well, you can't have wagons go through here unless you get people out of the way. And you can't have these booths all over the place, and you can't have open fires, and you can't have people dancing if you're going to expect traffic to come through here. So they begin to put in sidewalks on either side so that they stay on their side. And then the aesthetic enters into it. And they say, well, look, we've got this space here. Let's get it beautiful. So you begin to get architecture comes in, takes over the street. And this goes on. Of course, architecturally speaking, it was a great triumph and produced the magnificent avenues and cities that we're also familiar with and what we admire. But it does mean that the house is detached from street life. And this is fine for middle class and upper class. They like very much this isolation. The upper class has always hated the street. It's always been something you distrust. It's identified with street smarts, street language, street dress, street everything that's bad is, or common and vulgar and loud and disorderly, is identified with the street. And so the upper class doesn't mind one damn bit being detached from the street. But I think the lower class, or the working class, feels, well, hell, this is where we used to have a good time. It's where we worked. It's where we made a living, where we saw people, and now it's gone. If you look at 19th century drawings, people are walking on the sidewalks with baby carriages, and they have parasols. Down the middle goes this procession of carriages, perhaps once in a while a wagon, but it's quite a beautiful formal picture. This is the way they think of the street.
From Alamosa, we headed east. Route 160 leads over the crest of the Rocky Mountains and hooks up with I-25. We took that north along the Front Range toward the city of Pueblo, Colorado.
If it were 1925, it would probably be a bustling city. But 1988, it won't do. There has to be a different kind of street life, I would say. And there just isn't the money to produce it. There is a part of every American town as of up till about 1925 with this kind of thing. But I am aware of it in town after town, of this abandoned type of setup. And over there, I mean, there's second-hand cars. Please park in the rear. Who the hell can park in the rear in a business now?
Pueblo, Colorado has problems. The kind of problems that confront factory towns all over America. The steel mill that once dominated Pueblo is in decline. The workers' houses that ring the mill recall a more prosperous time when the steel business provided work and opportunity for thousands of families. Today in downtown Pueblo, the city looks uneasily for a new identity.
Who is being attracted to the downtown section? Do you think tourists? Well, tourists. There's nothing for tourists here. Maybe they hope in time to get boutiques and restaurants in here, but that isn't the way it is now, is it? No. It's pretty much what was here before.
Jackson traveled incessantly in his youth, throughout Europe as a boy and all over the United States after the war.
Parking, 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 the amount of space.
Pueblo has tried to revive the flagging fortunes of Old Main Street by giving the facades of the storefronts there a facelift. The results are sobering.
You don't want to condescend to a thing like this. This represents a big investment and a big effort, and I think they've done very nicely. I don't know what the future of it is, but then I'm not a prophet. I somehow don't think that Pueblo is the kind of place that's going to attract many tourists here, and very few things except for this last block that are tourist-oriented. All the rest of it you saw were carpeting by the wholesale and stuff like that. And I think it's nice what they've done, and it may be very profitable. It certainly is better than probably it was before. Not many jobs involved here, not many big incomes from rents, not many customers, but that's all right. Maybe it'll come.
Older cities, cities that were built before the automobile became so important, are in jeopardy if they can't adapt.
It makes my heart bleed, these little stores that just get nowhere.
Jackson took us north on I-25 to Colorado Springs. Unlike Pueblo, it's an affluent community of 250,000 people with homes of wealth and taste.
There is clearly such a thing as a middle or upper class American way of perceiving and creating a landscape. It is a landscape of private territories, admission to which is by invitation only. Life proceeds according to a fixed schedule from one territory to another, from private house to private tennis club to parish church and private school, and to pass through a gate, a portal, a front door, to park in a private driveway is more than merely entering. It is the affirmation of membership in a well-established group. As in a Jane Austen novel, nothing of significance happens in the public realm. And with little traffic and no sidewalks, the streets are like country roads, all eventually leading to privacy and home.
If Jackson is an archaeologist of the contemporary landscape, then streets and roads and highways are his artifacts. But it is the interstate that Jackson finds especially revealing.
The interstate does not allow, access wherever you want to. You stay where you belong. It has a fence on either side so that you cannot build onto the interstate. Well, we know what the interstate is, but it's a perfect example of what the establishment likes in the way of a space. It is carefully defined. It is used for one important purpose, which we all enjoy, but it is not used for casual purposes.
So that a picture of the interstate with its barriers and its special language, its special police force, it is a very regimented space.
I-25 continues north. Jackson wanted to visit Denver, a modern city of 500,000. He wants to look at the new spaces downtown. It would be the final stop of our journey.
Which is the street that's got the little streetcar running down that goes down? Is it 17th or 18th?
16th Street Mall.
Is that way or this way? Which way is 16th?
Go either one, you'll hit it eventually.
No, but if we go down that way, is this 16th?
Yeah, you'll hit 16th. It's 18th right here.
I know. He says it's 16th Street is where the streetcar is, and he says, I said, which way is 16th? Either way. I don't know what that means.
Jackson's interest is in the way cars and trucks have transformed the American city, disrupting the established order of urban architecture and bringing a new life to the street. The traffic and congestion that most people see as a problem are to Jackson agents of change.
The street, to me, is this extraordinary, not only vitality of people, but the pattern of movement that has been introduced by the automobile. And this is, again, comes back to what I'm interested in the American city. What I am fascinated with is the way houses have become, I don't know quite what the word is, honeycombed is a word, I suppose, with spaces for cars. There are underground garages, there are ramps that lead here, there are parking lots there. The whole thing, instead of being this monolithic piece of architecture which says, go to hell, you outside, we'll rule here. The building is being taken over or is becoming part of the street in an extraordinary way.
At the center of Denver's downtown area is a space found nearly everywhere in American cities, the pedestrian mall.
This is where they've taken the street, which wasn't particularly fashionable, and tried to maybe have succeeded in restoring it to become a pedestrian. They always hope that there's going to be activity in the evening, but that doesn't work in American cities usually. The city in, say, 150 years ago, or even 100 years ago, was thought of largely in architectural terms, massive masonry, units, and streets that led to them. And now this is not reversed, but very much modified in that the street is setting the pace. And so that almost everywhere we go, we're seeing either interaction with the street or reaction to the street. Pedestrian malls, this in a sense is reaction to heavy traffic, but it's still thinking in terms of the street, not in terms of architecture. I would say this is an attempt to produce, or at least the beginning of a vernacular space, which people are using this way or a variety of ways, but do not possess. They're not occupying it, and they're not making money on it. My constant criticism is, and it gets tiresome, is that there's such a great emphasis on recreation and leisure. Our lives are not devoted to those two things entirely, and they're places where people want to work, where they want to be serious, and that is something that we kind of exclude from the public realm. I think that's too bad. A great many of the planners, look at the little pictures they have of pedestrian malls. People carrying briefcases, children waving balloons, sitting drinking Cinzano at a table. There's no work involved in that. And when I was talking about this at Rice, that this whole atmosphere of the pedestrian world being a leisurely world, I said there's a guy in a sweatshirt, in a T-shirt, who's delivering a case of Coca-Cola right in the middle of that, and you're just not seeing him. And yet the idea is that if there's any space, well, let's have it for recreation. Let's have a picnic grove there, or let's have a baseball diamond, or let's have a museum there as a form of entertainment. And I think we're going astray there. I really do. I think that it isn't that work lacks dignity, it lacks visibility. And I think that if we could somehow make work visible, life would be much enriched.
I think what he's telling you through his own discipline and through his own way, his own style, is that, hey, focus on those things that I've labored over, because that's what I'm about. That's who I am. That's where my life, my heart, my spirit is. That's how you'll learn about me and how to see. And that's what I've devoted my lifetime and career to. Look at the final form of expression. It's the words and ideas of Jackson. It's the catalyst that he creates. It makes us see differently. It makes us see the landscape differently, ourselves differently, in the end.
Everyone says words are important, old letters are important, even photographs are important, TV programs are becoming important, but nobody thinks that back alleys are significant, or freeways are significant, or rows of ranch houses out in the suburbs. Well, that's, of course, what we're saying, is that those are equally important to the word, to understand American society, American culture.
After Denver, the journey complete, we return to Jackson's home in La Cienega. The trip had broken his regular routine, and there was work to be done, deadlines to meet, lectures to prepare. Although it has been 10 years since Jackson taught regularly in an American university, he's still sought after for articles, lectures, and advice. But if Landscape magazine introduced his ideas, it was his teaching that earned him the extravagant praise he enjoys today.
He flourished at Berkeley, no question about that. I think the faculty and graduate students collectively were smitten by him. He had so much to say. He lightened up the room every time he came in, and he made some close friends here.
He lectured in a way he would speak for 45 minutes in a class without showing slides. You know, he knew how architects lecture. They always lecture with slides. He knew how art historians lecture. They always lecture with 2 slides simultaneously. He would keep his slides until the last part of the class, the last 5 minutes. He'd have 4 to 10 slides, never fewer than 4, never more than 10, so that the whole lecture you were forming the images in your mind. But I think it was a conscious method to not rely on just vision, but to make you think abstractly. And that's how he did it. He made it so interesting. You wanted to go out and look at ordinary working class houses. You really wanted to look at fields. And he did it with this, I think, powerful thinking and writing.
I composed a series of lectures on the American landscape, and so that was the first time that it was formally given as a course. And I dare say it had a great many loopholes and a great many discrepancies and everything else, but it was the first time it had been done in this country. And my motive for doing it was not to achieve scholarly distinction, but simply to tell these young people about the United States. And that was at a time when there was a great deal of anti-American feeling, whether you all remember it or not, but there was. And Harvard was one of the hotbeds of it. A lot of young neo-Marxists or people who felt that America was so damn corrupt there was no use trying to disguise the fact. And these kids that were undergraduates were very often exposed to a depressing picture of the United States. And when it was announced, or when I announced to the class that I was giving a talk on the American landscape, you could just feel this sigh, oh, Jesus, we're going to get another raking over the coals because America's so awful. Well, they soon found that that was not my point of view. That my point of view was of affection and proprietorship and historical knowledge, and they enjoyed it.
Jackson retired from Berkeley and Harvard in 1978, but the courses that he founded are still being taught to yet another generation of students.
I call him the founder of the course I teach, and sometimes I even make the sign of the J, however a J goes when I'm teaching, saying just so students will, in kind of joking way, remember that this is almost sacred, the founding of this course.
Well, I usually used to end my lectures at Harvard by saying that you can't change a thing until you love it. And I would use as an illustration that you can't housebreak a dog without loving it. You can't teach a subject, or you can't teach students without having respect for them. And while that is a commonplace thought, it nevertheless is sometimes ignored. And you can get up and rant about a thing and say how vile it is and how disgusting it is, and all you've done is destroy it. You have not replaced it with anything. And so that is still a firm belief in my mind that we have to learn to love before we change anything.
Jackson today spends most of his time at home in La Cienega, but the world comes to him via his mailbox, routinely stuffed with letters, academic invitations, and magazines from around the world. On this day, Jackson received a letter from Michael Parfit, a young author much influenced by Jackson's writing.
I've just completed the manuscript of my latest book entitled Chasing the Glory. Oh, who's this? Michael Parfit. I got a telephone call from him last night.
Like so many others, Parfit wants to spend time with the man he sees as a personal mentor for advice, approval, benediction.
Well, I found out about John through his writing, and that
was so stunning to me because it was such clear and perceptive writing about geography that I immediately kind of designed my journeys around the country to include this stop here. It's like a pilgrimage. He became such an important part of my book that this visit turned out to be pivotal. You arrive here and it's a kind of a quiet, dramatic experience of just coming and talking to him. Well, you have never identified your own approach that clearly yourself.
No, I'm sure of it. I'm sure of it. I'm not surely considering myself as an example of either the right subject or anything else, but you become aware of it as you're discussed, that sometimes you're being treated fairly, but critically. It's quite possible. Other times it's the personality, and that I find very hard to take.
Parfit's book is an essay about life on the American continent. Jackson is a character in the book, serving as a counselor and guide as Parfit flies over farms, towns, and villages. He is a personal inspiration as well.
He is looking entirely for the specific, the real, the detail that reveals some reality about human life and everyday human life. And I really value that. That's the way I would love to be able to see the world, and I work on that. And yet you come to see somebody here who does it instinctively and naturally. It's wonderful to see.
Of course, we're in complete dark as to how these rooms communicated with each other.
John Brinkerhoff Jackson looks at America as it is, without prejudice and preconception, and with respect for its people and their works. What he seeks to discover in the landscape is not architecture, but the thing that binds people to place. What he sees is a living, changing document of what he values most of all, human life. He does not ask that we agree with him, but only that we also look and ask questions.
You see, there's a lot of fancy landscaping going on in front of those buildings there and in front of those.
I lure my students into Jackson's class saying, you know, we'll learn about this and we'll learn about that and we'll learn about ranches and we'll learn about open farms and all sorts of things. But at the end I tell them, well, I really haven't taught you anything except perhaps to ask questions. If I've done that, I'm happy. That there are no answers in the cultural landscape. You can't read it like a book. It's a book of questions.
It's a document out there that we ourselves have created, we and our ancestors. It's a document that can be read. It's a document that can be deciphered. And that act of reading, that act of deciphering, that act of looking, that act of asking questions is the thing that makes us human beings.
This was the big plaza here, and the church in the middle. They used to have a schoolhouse here. That's been torn down.
The transformations in the American landscape that Jackson has witnessed are paralleled by changes in his own life. An American aristocrat with a love of common places and common people, Jackson lives the duality he sees in the landscape.
You need to see the way Brink lives. And I feel that if you asked Brink, what is your philosophy of life? He would probably sort of say something like, how could you ask? And it's not a question that he would ever answer straight on. And you have to see it in the people around him as he lives, the choices he's made now as he begins to, quote, retire. Look at his house with its heavy Spanish walls and his mother's French antiques, the one matched against the other. You have to see from his behavior the evidence of a philosophy of life.
That philosophy sees history as one-sided. History as we know it is almost exclusively the history of establishment order and establishment landscapes.
And then when you get to modern technology, you're talking in terms of big business and what engineering is. Unfortunately, it's always the establishment perspective. Well, I try to go beyond that now. I just feel that that's very important, and we couldn't do without it. But something is happening underneath this that I find very valuable. And this is where I am now.
Jackson has spent a lifetime arguing that the vernacular, with its subtle influence, needs to be acknowledged and nourished. Historians need to study it. Architects need to build for it. Designers need to plan for it. But for Jackson, the vernacular is far more than an abstraction. It is a personal conviction and a way of life. He spends part of every morning working as a laborer in and around Santa Fe. He is active in his local church and community. Few of his neighbors know him as an American philosopher, neither do they care. And that is exactly the way Jackson wants it.
It has this question of sharing. And because I'm a Christian, I see Christian values as preached by Jesus being sort of re-recognized. And I'm always impressed with the fact that the prayer that we all give us this day our daily bread. It is not give us a supply of bread for 10 years. It is daily. It is on this small, intimate, neighborhood scale that we should live, or at least that we do live, most of us.
All the time, a final shot. The old man closes the book, goes into the house. The old man calls his dog, goes into the house. The old man gets into his pickup and drives off in a cloud of dust.
Banks are another instance of this suppression of space because, you know, in the old days, you used to have a little grill and the bank teller would push the money out from under the grill. Now they have these broad counters, and the bank I go to at Santa Fe has easy chairs. You sit there at a desk and you make out your check and you hand it over to a young lady.
What is the biggest problem in the downtown area?
Well, now, don't you ask me. You give the answer. It's your paper that you're writing. What do you think the problem is?
Well, I'm supposed to ask you, like...
Well, you're supposed to ask, but you ought to have some idea back. Well, do you think there are problems here?
Yeah,
Do you think? What would they be? What is the red here? Is that the building, or is that the...
actual building.
Well, then how can we see through this building? Oh, we're not seeing through it.
They tricked you.
They sure did.
That's the end of the thing, isn't it? That and the sunset over Chaco Canyon.
Funding for this program was provided by Gensler and Associates Architects, providing comprehensive architectural and interior design services nationwide, and by the Andrew W. Mellon Foundation and the National Endowment for the Arts.